Trapped thousands of feet underwater with a beautiful alien warrior, Alex discovers that some bonds transcend species, and some love stories can save entire civilizations. Dr. Alex Rivera had always loved the ocean. As a marine scientist, he spent most of his days studying sea creatures and underwater plants. Today was supposed to be just another research trip in his small submarine. He was diving deep into the Pacific Ocean, looking for new species of fish that lived in the darkest parts of the sea. The weather above was getting rough. Alex could hear the storm through his submarine's thick walls. Waves crashed against the surface hundreds of feet above him. But down here, everything should have been calm and peaceful. That's what he thought anyway. Then the light started flickering. Alex frowned and checked his control panel. Something was wrong with the power system. Very wrong. Red warning lights began flashing all around him. The submarine's computer started, beeping frantically, showing error messages he'd never seen before. "Come on, not now," Alex muttered, trying to fix whatever was going wrong. He pressed buttons and flipped switches, but nothing worked. The submarine was losing power fast. Even worse, it was sinking deeper and deeper into the ocean. Alex's heart started beating faster. He was already so deep that the water pressure outside could crush him like a tin can. If he went any deeper without power, he would never make it back to the surface. He grabbed the radio and tried to call for help, but all he heard was static noise. The submarine shook violently. Alex was thrown against the wall as something hit his vessel from outside. Through the small window, he saw something impossible. The water around him was glowing with strange blue and purple lights. It wasn't normal sea life. These lights were moving in patterns, almost like they were alive and thinking. Before Alex could figure out what was happening, his submarine crashed into something hard. The impact threw him across the cabin. His head hit the control panel, and everything went black. When Alex opened his eyes, he expected to be dead. Instead, he found himself lying on what felt like solid ground. But that was impossible. He had been thousands of feet underwater when he passed out. How could there be ground down here? Alex sat up slowly, his head still spinning from the crash. He looked around and couldn't believe what he was seeing. He was in some kind of cave, but unlike any cave he'd ever heard of. The walls were covered in plants and creatures that glowed with soft, colorful light. Blues, purples, greens, and yellows danced across the rocky surfaces like living paintings. The air smelled fresh and clean, not like the stale recycled air from his submarine. Somehow, this underwater cave had breathable air. Alex stood up and walked toward what looked like a pool of water. As he got closer, tiny glowing fish swam away from his reflection. Everything was so beautiful and strange that Alex almost forgot about his dangerous situation. Almost. He was still trapped underwater with no way to contact the surface. His submarine was probably destroyed and no one knew where he was. That's when he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. It was like metal scraping against rock, but rhythmic, like footsteps. Something big was moving in the shadows of the cave. Alex froze, afraid to make any noise. Wild thoughts ran through his mind. What kind of creature could survive down here? Was it dangerous? The footsteps got closer. Alex looked around for somewhere to hide, but the glowing plants made it impossible to stay completely hidden. He picked up a sharp piece of rock from the ground, knowing it wouldn't do much good against whatever was coming. Then she stepped into the light. Alex's mouth fell open. The creature walking toward him looked almost human, but definitely wasn't. She was tall, much taller than any person Alex had ever met. Her skin had a blue tint that seemed to shimmer like fish scales in water. Her hair was silver and moved like it was floating, even though they weren't underwater. But what struck Alex most were her eyes. They were large and seemed to change color as she looked at him. Right now they were a deep purple, but Alex could swear they had been green just a second ago. She wore some kind of armor that looked like it was made from the same glowing materials as the cave plants. In her hands, she carried weapons that pulsed with energy. Alex had never seen anything like them, not even in science fiction movies. The alien woman stopped about 10 feet away from Alex. She tilted her head, studying him like a scientist might study a new species. Alex realized that's exactly what he was to her. He was probably the first human she'd ever seen, just like she was the first alien he'd ever met. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Alex's heart was pounding, but not just from fear. There was something about this creature that seemed intelligent and curious, not hostile. She could have attacked him already if she wanted to hurt him. Instead, she did something unexpected. She set down her weapons and held up her hands, showing Alex that she meant no harm. Then she pointed to herself and said something in a language that sounded like music. It was beautiful, but Alex couldn't understand a single word. Alex pointed to himself and said, "Alex." His voice came out as a whisper. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I'm Alex." The alien woman repeated the sound, though it came out differently in her musical voice. She pointed to herself and said what must have been her name, but it was too complex for Alex to repeat. She began walking around the cave, and Alex noticed she was limping slightly. Following her gaze, he saw pieces of twisted metal scattered around the cave floor. It looked like the remains of some kind of spacecraft, much more advanced than his little submarine. The alien woman picked up a device from the wreckage and showed it to Alex. It was making weak beeping sounds and displaying symbols he didn't recognize. She pointed to the device, then to herself, then to the cave entrance. Even without words, Alex understood what she was trying to tell him. She was stranded here too. Her ship had crashed, just like his submarine. They were both trapped in this underwater cave with no way to call for help. The woman walked over to a pile of rocks near what might have once been the cave's entrance. She pushed against them with her impressive strength, but they barely moved. The entrance was completely blocked. They couldn't dig their way out, and Alex had no idea if anyone on the surface even knew where to look for them. As the reality of their situation sank in, Alex felt a mix of fear and strange excitement. He was trapped underwater with an alien being, something no human had ever experienced before. If he lived through this, it would change everything people knew about life in the universe. The alien woman seemed to be thinking the same thing. She looked at Alex for a long time, those color-changing eyes studying his face. Then she did something that surprised him even more than everything else that had happened. She knelt down in front of him and gently touched his forehead with her fingertips. Her skin was warm and felt almost electric. She spoke in her musical language, repeating the same phrases over and over like she was reciting something important. From the broken pieces of her technology, Alex heard fragments of words translated into English. Most of it was garbled, but one phrase came through clearly several times. Survival mate. Alex didn't know what that meant in her culture, but something about the way she said it made it sound important. Sacred, even. As she finished whatever ritual she was performing, her eyes changed to a warm golden color and she smiled at him. That smile changed everything. In that moment, Alex realized he wasn't just trapped with an alien creature. He was trapped with someone intelligent, someone who seemed to understand that they needed each other to survive, someone who had just made him her partner in this impossible situation. As the cave's glowing plants dimmed like a sunset, Alex looked around at his new world. It was beautiful, mysterious, and completely cut off from everything he'd ever known. But he wasn't alone. He had a survival mate now, whatever that meant. And somehow, despite everything that had gone wrong, Alex found himself looking forward to finding out. The next morning, Alex woke up to the sound of splashing water. He opened his eyes and saw his alien companion kneeling by one of the glowing pools. She was washing something that looked like pieces of her damaged equipment. The cave's natural light was brighter now, showing him details he hadn't noticed in the dim evening glow. Her movements were graceful but purposeful, like a dancer who was also a soldier. Alex watched as she carefully cleaned each piece of technology, examining it with the focus of someone who understood how important these broken devices might be to their survival. When she noticed Alex was awake, she looked up and made a sound that might have been a greeting. Her eyes were a soft blue color this morning, much calmer than the purple they'd been when they first met. Alex wondered if her eye color showed her emotions, like a mood ring. "Good morning," Alex said, pointing to himself and then to her. He Wasn't sure how to communicate, but he had to start somewhere. She tilted her head and repeated the sounds, though they came out completely different in her musical voice. Then she pointed to the glowing ceiling of the cave and said something in her own language. Alex guessed she was trying to say morning or day in her world's way of speaking. Over the next few hours, Alex learned that his alien friend was incredibly smart. She seemed to understand that they needed to find a way to talk to each other. She started by drawing pictures in the wet sand near the water's edge. First, she drew a circle and pointed up, then made the same circle in the sand and pointed to Alex. She was showing him that she came from another planet and asking where he was from. Alex drew what he hoped looked like Earth next to her planet drawing. When she saw it, her eyes changed to an interested green color. Next, she drew what looked like a battle scene. There were ships fighting in space and creatures that looked like nightmares attacking her people. She pointed to herself, then to the warrior figures in the drawing. Alex understood she was some kind of soldier or protector for her people. Alex tried drawing too. He showed her pictures of his submarine, the ocean, and the fish he studied. When she saw his drawings of Earth's sea creatures, she became very excited. She drew her own ocean animals, and Alex was amazed to see that her planet seemed to be covered mostly in water, just like Earth. She drew floating cities on her water world and people who looked like her swimming between them. Her people weren't just warriors, Alex realized. They were ocean dwellers, just like the marine life he'd spent his whole career studying. This discovery became the bridge between their worlds. Alex started showing her everything he knew about ocean life by drawing in the sand and acting out how different creatures moved and lived. She watched with fascination as he mimicked the way dolphins played or how octopuses changed colors. In return, she showed him how her people moved through water. She demonstrated swimming techniques that looked impossible, moving her arms in ways that seemed to bend the water around her. Even on dry land, Alex could see she was built for life in the ocean. As the days passed, they developed their own language of gestures, drawings, and sounds. Alex learned that her name sounded something like Zara when he tried to say it, though he knew he was probably saying it wrong. She seemed amused by his attempts and always smiled when he tried to speak her language. Zara learned to say Alex perfectly, and she taught him basic words in her language. Water was a flowing musical sound. Food was shorter and more practical. Safe was a warm, comforting tone that made Alex feel better just hearing it. But the most important word she taught him was survival mate. She explained it through drawings and gestures, showing two figures helping each other through dangers. It wasn't about romance, Alex learned. It was about trust. Complete, absolute trust between two people facing impossible odds. In her culture, choosing someone as a survival mate meant you were willing to share everything with them: food, shelter, protection, knowledge. It meant you would never abandon them, no matter how dangerous things got. It was the highest honor one warrior could give to another. Alex felt honored and a little overwhelmed. He'd never been responsible for someone else's life before, and now this incredible warrior was trusting him with hers. But as the days went by, he realized she wasn't just depending on him. She was teaching him to depend on her too. Zara showed Alex which cave plants were safe to eat and which ones would make him sick. She taught him how to catch the glowing fish in the pools using his hands, moving so quietly that the fish didn't notice until it was too late. She even showed him how to make fire using pieces of her technology, giving them warmth and a way to cook their food. In return, Alex taught Zara about the cave's ecosystem. He explained how the glowing creatures were connected to each other, how some ate others, and how all of them depended on the minerals in the cave walls. His scientific knowledge helped them understand their environment better and find new sources of food and fresh water. Working together, they explored more of the cave system. It was much bigger than Alex had first thought. There were tunnels, leading in different directions, chambers filled with different types of glowing life, and pools that connected to underground rivers. But the most amazing discovery came when they ventured into the deepest part of the cave system. Following a tunnel that seemed to glow brighter than the others, they found themselves in a huge chamber filled with structures that definitely weren't natural. The walls were covered in smooth, carved stone that formed patterns and shapes Alex had never seen before. Strange symbols were etched into every surface, and some of them seemed to glow faintly when Zara got close to them. "This is old," Alex whispered, running his hands over the carved walls. "Really, really old." Zara nodded, her eyes wide with wonder and turning a bright silver color. She touched one of the symbols and it glowed brighter for a moment. Whatever this place was, it responded to her in some way. As they explored the ancient chamber, Alex realized they weren't just trapped survivors anymore. They were explorers, discovering something that might be more important than either of their individual worlds. This place held secrets that could change everything. But first, they had to figure out what those secrets were. And to do that, they needed to keep learning from each other. Alex looked at Zara, who was studying the symbols, with the same scientific curiosity he'd seen in his best colleagues back home. They made a good team, he thought. A marine biologist from Earth and a warrior from the stars, working together to unlock mysteries that neither of their people had ever imagined. As they made camp in the ancient chamber that night, Alex felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt like he belonged somewhere, with someone who understood him. Even though they came from different worlds, they both loved learning, exploring, and discovering new things. Maybe being trapped wasn't the worst thing that could have happened to him after all. Alex woke up to find Zara standing perfectly still in front of one of the glowing symbols. Her hand was pressed against the carved stone, and her eyes had turned a deep gold color he'd never seen before. The symbol under her palm was pulsing, with light getting brighter and dimmer like a heartbeat. "Zara?" Alex called softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned to look at him, excitement clear on her face. She gestured for him to come closer, then placed her other hand on a different symbol. This time, both symbols began glowing together and something incredible happened. The air in front of them shimmered like heat waves, and suddenly they were looking at moving pictures made of light. It was like watching a movie, but the images were floating in the air between them. Alex stared in amazement as scenes from long ago played out in front of their eyes. The pictures showed people who looked similar to Zara, but different enough that Alex could tell they were from much earlier times. These ancient beings lived in beautiful underwater cities, with towers that spiraled up through the ocean like glass trees. Their technology was incredible, but it had an organic feel to it, like they had learned to grow their machines instead of building them. But the peaceful scenes changed quickly. Dark shapes appeared in the images, creatures that looked like nightmares come to life. They moved like a swarm of insects, but each one was the size of a person. Where they touched the beautiful cities, everything turned black and twisted. Alex watched in horror as the ancient civilization fought against these creatures. The defenders were brave, but they were losing. The dark beings seemed to absorb everything they touched, growing stronger while their enemies grew weaker. Zara was watching too, her eyes now a deep, sad blue. She pointed to the dark creatures and spoke a word in her language that sounded like a curse. Then she pointed to herself and said the same word, but with fear in her voice. "These things," Alex said, trying to understand. "They're still around, aren't they? They're what you were fighting when you crashed here." Zara nodded grimly. Through their improving communication, she managed to explain that her people called these creatures the Vrak. They had been fighting them for thousands of years, across many different star systems. The Vrak didn't just destroy civilizations. They absorbed them, turning everything they conquered into extensions of themselves. The ancient holographic movie showed the final battle. The people in the underwater cities realized they couldn't win, so they did something desperate. They gathered their most important knowledge and technology, sealed it away in hidden places, and scattered across the galaxy to warn other worlds. Some of them, Alex realized, had come to Earth. This cave system wasn't just a hiding place, and it was one of their secret archives, designed to preserve their knowledge for future generations who might continue the fight against the Vrak. As the images faded away, Alex felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cave's temperature. "Your people," he said to Zara, Are they descendants of these ancient beings? Zara nodded sadly, then drew a picture in the sand showing her home planet under attack. The Vrak had found her world, and her people were losing the same war their ancestors had fought ages ago. Her mission hadn't been just exploration. She had been part of an evacuation fleet, trying to save as many of her people as possible. Alex's heart sank as he understood what she was telling him. Zara wasn't just trapped in this cave. She was trapped while her entire civilization was being destroyed. Every day they spent here was another day she couldn't help her people. But Zara surprised him by taking his hand and squeezing it gently. Through their gestures and broken words, she explained that finding this ancient archive might be more important than anything else. The knowledge here could be the key to finally defeating the Vrak. Over the following days, they worked together to unlock more of the ancient technology. Alex's human DNA and Zara's alien heritage seemed to work together in ways the original builders had planned. Some devices would only activate when both of them touched it at the same time. They discovered star maps showing the locations of other, hidden archives, battle plans for fighting the Vrak, and most importantly, weaknesses in the enemy that no one in the current war knew about. The ancient beings had learned secrets about the Vrak that could change everything. But the long hours of working together did more than just unlock ancient secrets. They brought Alex and Zara closer in ways that surprised both of them. When Alex got frustrated trying to understand a particularly complex piece of technology, Zara would place her hand on his shoulder, and her presence would calm him down. When Zara became sad thinking about her distant homeworld, Alex would share stories about his own life that made her smile. They developed evening routines that felt natural and comfortable. After their daily work in the archives, they would sit by the glowing pools and share meals of cave fish and edible plants. Alex taught Zara about Earth's constellations by drawing them in the sand, while she told him stories about the stars from her homeworld. During these quiet conversations, Alex learned about Zara's life before the war. She had been training to become a guardian, a protector of her people, since she was very young. Her childhood had been filled with combat training and warrior ceremonies, but also with art, music, and the study of ocean life. Her people believed that understanding the natural world was just as important as knowing how to fight. Alex shared his own story too. He told Zara about growing up near the ocean, about becoming fascinated with marine life as a child, and about dedicating his adult life to studying and protecting Earth's seas. He talked about feeling lonely in his research, always working alone, never finding someone who shared his passion for discovery. One evening, as they sat watching the cave's bioluminescent creatures create patterns like underwater fireworks, Alex realized something that should have scared him but didn't. He was falling in love with Zara, not just because she was beautiful and strong, but because she understood him in ways no one else ever had. She looked at the world with the same sense of wonder he did, and she faced challenges with a combination of intelligence and courage that inspired him. When he looked at Zara, he could see something similar in her golden eyes. She was feeling the same connection he was. Despite coming from different worlds, despite the barriers of language and culture, they had found something precious together. But their growing closeness was interrupted by a discovery that changed everything. While exploring a new section of the cave system, they found something that made Alex's blood run cold. Carved into the wall, much more recently than the ancient symbols, were marks that looked like claw scratches. They were fresh, maybe only days old. Something else was in the caves with them, something that hadn't been there when they first arrived. Zara examined the scratches with the trained eye of a warrior. Her expression grew grim, and her eyes shifted to a deep red color that Alex had learned meant danger. She drew a quick picture in the sand, creatures that looked like the Vrak from the ancient holograms but smaller and more scout-like. The enemy had found them. Somehow, the Vrak had tracked them to this hidden refuge. Their peaceful time of discovery and growing love was about to become a fight for survival. As they hurried back to their main camp to gather weapons and supplies, Alex felt a strange mix of fear and determination. He wasn't a warrior like Zara, but he wasn't going to let these creatures destroy her or the precious knowledge they had found together. Looking at Zara as she prepared her energy weapons for battle, Alex knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. They were survival mates, bound by trust and growing love, and neither of them would ever abandon the other. The real test of their bond was about to begin. The Vrak scouts found them 3 days later. Alex was gathering glowing fruits from the cave plants when he heard Zara's warning call. Her voice echoed through the tunnels with an urgency that made his heart skip. He dropped the food and ran toward the sound, arriving just in time to see Zara fire her energy weapon at something moving in the shadows. The creature that screeched and retreated into the darkness was nothing like Alex had imagined from the ancient holograms. It was about the size of a large dog, but it moved like liquid shadow. Its body seemed to shift and change shape as it moved, and where its claws had scraped against the cave wall, the rock looked burned and twisted. "How many?" Alex asked, even though he knew Zara might not understand the exact words. She held up 3 fingers, then pointed to different tunnel entrances around their camp. They were surrounded, but the creatures seemed to be watching and waiting rather than attacking directly. Over the next few hours, Alex learned why. The Vrak scouts weren't just hunters, they were spies. They were studying him and Zara, learning their patterns and weaknesses. Every time Alex tried to venture near a tunnel entrance, he caught glimpses of glowing eyes watching him from the darkness. Zara explained through their shared language of gestures and drawings that these scouts were the advance team. They would study their prey, then report back to larger Vrak forces. Soon this place would be crawling with the creatures that had destroyed her homeworld. But the immediate danger forced Alex and Zara to work together in new ways. They had to defend their territory while continuing to unlock the ancient archive's secrets. The knowledge here might be their only hope of fighting back against the Vrak invasion. Working side by side during those tense days, Alex discovered something wonderful and terrifying at the same time. His feelings for Zara had grown into something deeper than friendship or even partnership. When she smiled at him after they successfully activated another piece of ancient technology, his heart felt like it might burst. When she placed her hand on his arm to comfort him after a particularly close encounter with a Vrak scout, he felt more connected to another being than he ever had in his life. The problem was, he could see the same feelings in Zara's color-changing eyes. When she looked at him now, her eyes turned a warm golden color that seemed to glow from within. She had started small gestures that couldn't be mistaken for anything other than affection. Brushing his hair away from his face when he was concentrating, sitting closer to him during their evening meals, and sharing her warmth when the caves grew cold at night. They were falling in love, and it was both the most beautiful and most heartbreaking thing Alex had ever experienced, because every breakthrough they made in the ancient archives brought the same terrible reality closer to the surface. Using the star maps and communication devices they discovered, they had managed to build a signal beacon that could reach across the galaxy. They could call for help from Zara's people, if any of them were still alive to answer. The decision to activate the beacon became the hardest choice Alex had ever faced. If they sent the signal, there was a chance that Zara's people would come to rescue her, but it would also mean losing her forever. One evening, as they sat by their favorite glowing pool, Zara used their shared vocabulary to explain something that broke Alex's heart. In her culture, the Guardians, the warrior class she belonged to, were forbidden from forming permanent bonds with beings from other worlds. The reasoning was practical. Divided loyalties could compromise a guardian's duty to protect their people. Even if she was rescued, even if some of her people had survived the Vrak invasion, their relationship could never be officially recognized. She would have to choose between her love for Alex and her responsibility to her surviving people. "But what do you want?" Alex asked, using the gestures and words they'd developed together. Zara's eyes cycled through several colors: gold for love, blue for sadness, silver for uncertainty. She drew 2 pictures in the sand. In one, she showed herself with Alex living peacefully in the caves and exploring the ancient mysteries together. In the other, she drew herself with other figures that looked like her people fighting the Vrak among the stars. Alex understood. She wanted both but couldn't have both, and the decision was tearing her apart. That night, Alex made a choice that surprised even himself. He activated the beacon without telling Zara. He couldn't let his own happiness doom an entire civilization. If Zara's people were still alive, if there were survivors who needed her knowledge and her strength, then she had to go to them. Even if it meant Alex would spend the rest of his life alone in these caves wondering what might have been. When Zara discovered what he'd done, her eyes flashed red with anger, then quickly shifted to the deep blue of profound sadness. Through tears and broken words, she demanded to know why he had made such a choice without her. Alex drew his own pictures in the sand. He showed her people being saved because of her knowledge and strength. He showed the ancient archive's secrets, being used to defeat the Vrak. And finally he showed himself alone but content, knowing that she was safe and fulfilling her destiny among the stars. Zara stared at the drawings for a long time. Then she did something that almost broke Alex's resolve. She erased his picture of himself alone and drew a new one. The two of them together, surrounded by both humans and her own people, sharing the knowledge they'd discovered. It was a beautiful dream, but Alex knew it was just that. A dream. Different species, different worlds, different duties. Some things couldn't be overcome, no matter how much love existed between them. The signal beacon transmitted for 3 days before they received an answer. When the response came through, the ancient communication system, Zara's reaction told Alex everything he needed to know. Her eyes turned bright silver with joy and relief. Her people, at least some of them, had survived. The message was in her language, but Alex could guess what it said. Coordinates for a meeting place, instructions for extraction, a promise of rescue from her trapped situation. But as Zara listened to the message, her expression changed. The joy faded from her eyes, replaced by something Alex couldn't quite read. She played the message several times, each time looking more troubled. Finally, she managed to explain what the message contained. Her people had established a colony on a distant world, far from Vrak territory. They were safe, but barely surviving. They needed every guardian, every warrior, every person who could help rebuild their civilization. The message also contained news that made Alex's heart sink. The Vrak had indeed followed the signal. Enemy ships were already heading toward their location. The rescue team would arrive soon, but so would the creatures that wanted to destroy everything Alex and Zara had found together. Their peaceful time of discovery and growing love was about to become a battlefield. And at the end of that battle, no matter who won, Zara would leave with her people and Alex would never see her again, unless they could find a way to change the rules that kept them apart. But with Vrak ships approaching and rescue coming, they were running out of time to figure out how love might triumph over duty and tradition. As they prepared for the coming conflict, Alex looked at Zara and made a silent promise. Whatever happened, in the battle ahead he would make sure she survived to help her people. Even if it cost him everything, he would protect the woman he loved long enough for her to fulfill her destiny among the stars. The attack came at dawn, when the cave's bioluminescent creatures were at their dimmest. Alex woke to the sound of Zara's energy weapons charging up, a high-pitched whine that made his teeth ache. She was already in full combat mode, her eyes blazing red as she scanned the tunnel entrances. The Vrak had grown bolder overnight. Instead of the small scouts they'd been dealing with, larger creatures now prowled just outside their camp. Alex could hear them moving in the darkness. The scrape of claws on stone, the wet sound of bodies that seemed to be made of living shadow. "How long until your people arrive?" Alex whispered, even though he knew the Vrak probably didn't understand human speech. Zara held up her hand, showing him the countdown display on one of her devices. 6 hours. They had to hold out for 6 more hours. The first wave of attackers came from 3 directions at once. Alex got his first clear look at the adult Vrak and immediately wished he hadn't. They were roughly human-sized but moved like spiders, their bodies shifting between solid and liquid as they climbed along the cave walls. Where they touched the ancient carved symbols, the stone turned black and began to crumble. Zara's weapons were incredibly effective, sending bolts of energy that made the creatures screech and retreat. But Alex quickly realized they had a bigger problem. There were too many of them, and Zara's weapon charges wouldn't last forever. I can help, Alex said, grabbing one of the metal poles from Zara's crashed ship. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was better than hiding while she did all the fighting. To his surprise, Zara nodded and tossed him something from her equipment belt. It was a small device that attached to his makeshift weapon and made it glow with the same energy as her guns. When he swung it at one of the Vrak creatures, the thing dissolved like smoke. Working together, they managed to drive back the first attack. But Alex could see more creatures gathering in the tunnels beyond their camp. This was just the beginning. Over the next few hours, they fought battle after battle. Alex discovered he was braver than he'd ever imagined when Zara's life was on the line. When a particularly large Vrak creature tried to attack her from behind, Alex threw himself between them without thinking. The energy weapon she'd given him saved his life, but just barely. Between attacks, they worked frantically to prepare the ancient archive for whatever came next. If they didn't survive, at least the knowledge they'd discovered might be preserved for future generations. Alex helped Zara program the archive's defense systems, which had been dormant for thousands of years. Your people, Alex said during a brief break in the fighting. When they get here, they'll take all of this back to your colony, won't they? Zara nodded, but her eyes showed the same sadness Alex felt. This incredible place that had brought them together would be stripped of its secrets and abandoned, just like their relationship. The final wave of Vrak came just as Alex's strength was starting to give out. These weren't the shadow creatures they'd been fighting. These were something worse. They looked like warriors from Zara's people, but twisted and corrupted by the Vrak's influence. Alex realized with horror that these had once been guardians like Zara, captured and changed into weapons against their own kind. The sight of her corrupted colleagues hit Zara harder than any physical attack could have. Her eyes filled with tears, as she was forced to fight against beings who had once been her friends and mentors. That's when the rescue ships arrived. Alex heard them before he saw them. A deep humming sound that made the whole cave system vibrate. Beams of light cut through the darkness as Zara's people descended into the cave system. Their weapons were even more advanced than Zara's, making short work of the remaining Vrak forces. The leader of the rescue team was another tall, blue-skinned warrior who looked enough like Zara to be her sister. When she saw Alex fighting alongside Zara, her eyes went wide with surprise. Through their shared language, Alex heard Zara explaining who he was and what they'd discovered together. As the immediate danger passed, Alex felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. Zara was safe, her people had survived, and the ancient knowledge would be preserved. But he was about to lose the most important person in his life. The rescue leader, who Alex learned was actually Zara's sister and commanding officer, examined the ancient archive with growing excitement. The knowledge Alex and Zara had discovered was even more valuable than they'd hoped. It contained not just battle plans for fighting the Vrak, but the location of other archives across the galaxy. But then the sister said something that made Zara's eyes flash with anger and hope at the same time. Alex couldn't understand the exact words, but he could guess what they were discussing, him, and whether there was any way he could be part of Zara's future. The argument between the sisters went on for nearly an hour. Other members of the rescue team joined in, examining Alex with curious expressions and scanning him with devices he didn't recognize. Finally, Zara's sister approached Alex directly. She had learned some basic English from her ship's computers during the journey to find them. Her words were slow and careful, but clear enough for Alex to understand. You, she said, pointing to Alex. You helped find ancient knowledge. You saved Zara's life. You fought beside Guardian against Vrak. Alex nodded, not sure where this was going. Our council, she continued, has decided. This place too important to abandon. We need permanent research station here. Need someone who understands ancient technology and Earth oceans. Alex's heart started beating faster. What are you saying? Zara stepped forward, her eyes bright gold with hope. Through a mixture of her sister's broken English and their own shared language, she explained the incredible decision her people had made. They wanted Alex to stay and run the research station. They would bring teams of both human and Zara's people to study the archive and search for other hidden locations. Alex would be the bridge between their civilizations, helping them work together against the Vrock threat. And Zara would be assigned as the station's guardian, protecting the researchers and continuing to explore the ancient mysteries they'd discovered, together. But what about the rules? Alex asked. About guardians not being allowed to form bonds with people from other worlds? Zara's sister smiled, the first smile Alex had seen from any of Zara's people except Zara herself. Rules change, she said simply, especially when survival depends on cooperation between species. As the rescue team worked to establish permanent equipment in the cave system, Alex found himself alone with Zara by their favorite glowing pool, the same place where they'd shared so many quiet evenings, learning about each other and falling in love. So, Alex said, hardly daring to believe what was happening. We're going to be working together permanently. Zara's eyes cycled through every color Alex had learned to recognize. Gold for love, silver for joy, blue for contentment, and finally settling on a warm purple that seemed to contain all her emotions at once. She took his hands in hers and spoke in careful English words she'd been practicing with her sister. Partners, she said. Research partners, survival partners, life partners. Alex laughed, feeling happier than he'd ever imagined possible. I love you too, he said. 3 months later, the cave system had been transformed into a thriving research station. Human scientists worked alongside Zara's people, studying the ancient archive and planning expeditions to find other hidden sites across the galaxy. Alex had been officially appointed as the Director of Interspecies Archaeological Research, AI, title that made him smile every time he heard it. But his favorite title was the one Zara used when they were alone together, survival mate. They had held their bonding ceremony at the glowing pool where they'd fallen in love, witnessed by members of both their species. It was the first official union between a human and one of Zara's people, setting a precedent that would change both their civilizations. As Alex stood on the research station's observation deck, watching teams of humans and aliens working together, in the caves below, he thought about how much his life had changed. He'd started as a lonely marine biologist studying Earth's oceans. Now he was part of the most important scientific endeavor in galactic history, married to an incredible warrior from the stars, and helping to build an alliance that might save both their worlds. The cave where he'd first met Zara had become more than just a research station. It had become a symbol of hope, proving that even the most different beings could find common ground when they faced danger together. And every evening, when the day's work was done, Alex and Zara still sat by their special pool, sharing stories about their respective worlds and planning their next adventure together. They were survival mates, partners in every sense of the word, and their love story had become the foundation for a friendship between species that would echo across the stars for generations to come.